Howdy again everyone, and let's get straight into reviewing the living daylights out of the new Samyang AF 50mm f1.4 FE Mark II. It's a lens for Sony's E-mount mirrorless cameras, full frame or APS-C, and it costs $700 or about £600 here in the UK. I'd like to thank Samyang's UK distributor for loaning me a copy of this lens for a week or so for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. And who doesn't like a full frame 50mm lens? I must have tested more than 50 or 60 of them by now. They are so popular because they give you quite a natural feeling, standard field of view, neither too wide nor too telephoto, but still giving you a nice little emphasis on your subject. And of course, that maximum aperture of f1.4 lets you easily shoot in darker situations and get vividly out of focus backgrounds. Samyang's original autofocus 50mm f1.4 lens came out so long ago that I didn't own a full-frame Sony camera to test it on at the time. I only tested it on an APS-C camera where it's turned in an okay performance but wasn't really anything special. Well, let's see what improvements Samyang might or might not have made. This new version of their 50mm lens is smaller and lighter than the original, weighing only 420 grams. The lens body is made of plastic, except for that metallic lens mount, which is surrounded by quite a narrow weather sealing gasket. On the side of the lens, there's a button to switch between using the focus ring for manual focus or for aperture control, although you can customize it to control other things too. The focus ring itself is nicely rubberized, it turns smoothly but pretty heavily, and as you can see here, the manual focus response is very slow. You might also notice here that the lens displays very little focus breathing, which is useful for video makers. The autofocus motor works silently, but in single shot autofocus, slowly. Wang your camera onto continuous autofocus mode and things speed up a little. Focus accuracy wasn't always great, the lens would occasionally miss focus by just a little, but not too often. The lens has a 72mm filter thread and comes with an impressively deep plastic hood. Overall, the build quality is fine here, but the focus system didn't inspire confidence. Well, let's move on and look at image quality now. I'll start by testing it on a full frame camera, my 42MP Sony a7R III. In-camera corrections are turned off. In the middle of the image we see good sharpness but just average contrast with a touch of ghosting on strongly contrasting edges. Corner image quality is softer with low contrast. Stop down to f2 for noticeably better sharpness and contrast there, and back in the middle, picture quality suddenly becomes fantastic. At f2.8 we see absolute razor sharpness in the middle of the image, and the corners look a little better than before. At f4 and f5.6 we see further, very tiny improvements, but that's about as sharp as the corners get. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, as you can see. Overall, it's just an average performance here on full frame. It's not a soft lens by any means, but I was hoping for a little more resolution in the image corners. Let's see how the lens performs on a camera with a smaller APS-C sized sensor, in this case my little 24MP Sony a5100. At f1.4, the lens remains quite sharp in the middle, which is nice, although a touch of purple colour fringing is getting picked up by the higher density APS-C sensor. The corner image quality is a little softer but still good, better than it was on full frame, a classic example of the APS-C sweet spot effect. Stop down to f2 and the corner image quality now looks fantastic, and back in the middle we see razor sharpness. At f2.8, any lingering chromatic aberration is finally gone, and that razor sharpness has now spread into the corners. The lens stays this sharp until you reach about f11, where the effects of diffraction are softening things again. But ultimately, we can conclude that this lens is clearly feeling a bit more comfortable on an APS-C camera than it does on full frame, offering plenty of resolution here. Okay, let's turn off in-camera corrections and see about distortion and vignetting on a full frame camera. The lens projects almost no distortion here, which is great to see. Less encouraging is the very heavy vignetting at f1.4. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 to see those corners brighten up. This lens can focus down to 40cm, which is just a little closer than average for a 50mm optic. Close-up image quality is pretty poor at f1.4 though. f2 looks about as bad, but at f2.8 we finally see some decent sharpness, and at f4 any sneaky colour fringing has been eliminated too. Let's take a look now at how this lens works against bright lights. We don't really see much in the way of flaring, fortunately. What little there is seems to pop up when bright lights are just outside the picture, which means that using the supplied lens hood should be particularly helpful. And while we're working in the dark, let's take a look at coma levels. It's fairly good news here too. Bright points of light on your image corners show just a little smearing, but not much at all really. At f2 they look about the same, but at f2.8 any kind of residual smudginess is gone. Let's zoom out and take a look for sun stars now. Stop down to f8 and sun stars begin to emerge. At f11 and f16 they get really quite strong. A very important consideration for a bright 50mm lens is the quality of its autofocus backgrounds, so let's take a look at them. To me, they look lovely and soft really, no problems here at all, although we do see a bit of the usual cat's eye shape to specular highlights in the image corners. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. We run across quite an issue here as a Mardi Gras of beautiful but false colour bursts upon the bokeh highlights at f1.4. f2 is about the same and it's still there at f2.8, it's even still an issue at f4. At f5.6 though, it finally goes away. So then, overall, well, I found the Samyang AF 50mm f1.4 Mark II a little bit of a mixed bag, but not a bad lens by any means. It's decently sharp on a full-frame camera, but not competitively so, and it certainly has issues when shooting close up. I also found its focus mechanism to be a bit clunky. However, it does generate some beautiful out-of-focus backgrounds, and it's also very sharp when used on a camera with an APS-C sized sensor. Its colours are on the warm side. At £600, it's a little expensive for what you're getting here. For example, the Sigma 50mm f1.4 Art lens is just a little more money, but offers sharper image quality. Then again, that lens is very big and heavy by comparison, so it swings and roundabouts here, I guess. Let me know what you think of this new Samyang lens in the description below, and ciao for now. Thanks again for watching, and I do hope you find these reviews helpful, and a big thank you to the Patreon supporters out there who are making such a difference to the work I'm doing. I love producing bonus content for them whenever I can, including special bonus videos. Take a look if you like at the link in the description below.